This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. What's up everybody? Happy almost New Year. 2024, man, this has been something. What kind of ride have we had with some of our teams here, obviously with the Commanders. Washington Spirit also, I just want to, as we kind of close out the new year, just say thank you to them for the opportunity to call their matches for the first time this year on ESPN 630. And on their app. It was incredible ride with them. They made it all the way to the NWSL championship. And I'm just, so proud of the group that we had put together and what we were able to do. And they fell just short on a bad call, but it was a magical run by that team. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you to them as we close out 2024 and then focus in on what's next for 2025 after what has been, professionally, by far not close, my favorite season covering, being part of the Washington Commanders. Obviously this is my fifth season calling the games. I'm getting the cinematic NFL Films treatment every single week now because of all the dramatic things that they're doing. It's just been such an incredible ride. What the Harris, Rails, Ein, Magic, everybody ownership group put in place and set in motion, hiring Adam Peters, giving him the robust staff that he has, allowing them to go pick their coach, Dan Quinn, allowing that coach to go get a deep, strong staff underneath him with ex-head coaches, and then, of course, drafting Jaden Daniels and the rest of this draft class to kind of baseline a roster, bringing in veterans, which I'll get to in a second, who have just displayed so much leadership for this team. And then they just kind of go on a run that I haven't been a part of in my adult lifetime. This is the most clutch team that I've covered in my adult lifetime, and it's been a joy to be in the booth and calling their games. You're going to hear a segment, as you do most weeks here, of me and London Fletcher. We do a podcast called The Booth Review, which is the day after our chance to kind of download with one another what we saw during the game when we called it. And this one, of course, kind of took more of a big picture viewpoint because they won 11 games. The 11th came the other night. They haven't done that since 1991. So there's a generation of people that haven't seen them win that many games. 10 was few and far between. Last time that had happened was 2012. They qualified for the playoffs. It will be as a wild card. The first time that that's happened in 18 years. 18 years it's been since they qualified as a wild card. So the only times that they had qualified for the playoffs, literally over the last 20, 25 years, was if they won the division, and they had to do so in a year where the division kind of came back to their standard, which was 10 or below. Those are the only times that they were able to get to the playoffs. And that's why I think this feels just so utterly different. What's going on right now, this season, I don't think is an anomaly. I don't think it's a one-off. I think we see what this quarterback can do. I think we feel the change in culture across the board, from the money that was invested into the training facility, the stadium itself, day pressure to try to get legislation done to try to build a new home sooner rather than later, hopefully at RFK, maybe in the state of Maryland, maybe in the state of Virginia, wherever, just something modern, new that becomes our new home. They're working to do that. The front office and the coaching staff preaching that they're going to build something that is not only can win now, but is sustainable. There's going to be a real culture here that people are going to buy into. And it's just been an incredible experience to watch all of this kind of come to be. And then the football gods have been very friendly to this team. Thankfully, Riley Patterson could not make a 56-yard field goal. Thankfully, a Bears cornerback was waving at our crowd and not paying attention to a Hail Mary that bounced into Noah Brown's hands. And then there are the other things that aren't circumstance or luck or karma. They're a quarterback who is the most clutch quarterback I've seen, the best quarterback play I've seen in my adult lifetime, and maybe the best quarterbacking season that this team's ever had, frankly. Like since maybe Sonny Jurgensen, maybe since Joe Theismann, maybe since Doug in the Super Bowl year, who didn't even start every game, for this team. Jaden Daniels has changed everything about the trajectory of the team. And the hope is that, for me, that we're now going to be part of what I grew up with, which was a team that was competitive every single year. And hopefully we have the type of results that the Joe Gibbs teams had in the 1980s into the early 1990s. But Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have a group that needs to be reckoned with every single year, kind of like what was built in Detroit. Detroit was a team that had gone a long time, far longer than Washington, having any level of consistency whatsoever. And they brought in Dan Campbell, and they made that trade, Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff, and a culture was built for them. And now they are, arguably the best team in the NFC. They made it to the NFC Championship a year ago. That wasn't satisfactory enough for them. They're right there again this year. They're fighting through injuries. They still might get the 1 seed anyway. And there feels something very sustainable about what they're doing. They're one of the, 4 to 5 teams in the conference that are going to have to be reckoned with every year for a window of time. And that's where I hope that we're heading into. There's no promises. It's hard to know what's going to happen. And obviously a lot occurs in each and every year, and each year's different. But it does feel like we've set up a baseline for being one of those teams that's consistently competitive. And it's just been a joyride to be part of the whole thing. So I wanted to spend today just kind of reminiscing a little bit about that, talking about it and where we are. And I want to use, London and our segment. And I also want you to hear from Dan Quinn and Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz, who, had 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, the game winner, sends them to the playoffs, 72 yards. Dan Quinn admitted yesterday when they signed Zach Ertz, they were looking at him as he's going to be a red zone threat, and they'd use him situationally on some third downs because that's what they, thought that he could provide, and it's totally grown from there. The expectation was he was not going to be put into the role that he was, which is primary pass receiving tight end on almost every offensive play. But here we are. Here's a guy who's probably going to be up for, if not in the Hall of Fame, playing, and Bobby Wagner signed here, playing, rejuvenated, all these other veterans that came in. So for Ertz, I really thought what he said after the game was really kind of prescient to where the team is. Take a listen to Zach Ertz after the game.
Every day since the moment I got here, this place has exceeded every expectation I had. Being in this division for a long time, you just kind of heard things, that rumblings here and there. And from the moment I got here, it just feels like all those stories were just not any part of the experience that I've had. And I feel like that stems from everything that Josh has done, what AP has done, what DQ has done. And this is honestly some of the most fun I've ever had playing football. And just being able to be a part of this team, be a part of this group of guys has been really, really enjoyable. The past 2 years for me have been really tough as a player. And so just being able to come out here with people that truly believed in me, like Cliff, DQ, has really just allowed me to be at my best again. And I've loved being a part of this team. I love being part of this group of guys, like I said. And it feels awesome to obviously be able to go to the playoffs in our first year. But we also feel like we still have some room to grow, room to improve. And we got another game next week, and so we just can't rest on our laurels, per se.
Obviously, everybody knows the star players, right, all the time. But you guys, especially in recent weeks, have had guys, Jamison Crowder, obviously very popular around here, but Olamide Zaccheaus, Chris Rodriguez today stepping up in key moments. What does it say about your team that you can have those types of guys and role players really step up when the pressure is the highest? I
think all those guys have done a phenomenal job, especially just what we see on Sundays is what we see every day during the week. And really, guys prepare like they're going to play in these big moments, even if they're on the practice squad, like C-Rod was, per se, like JC when he was on IR working on a side field over and over and over again. And OZ bouncing from team to team and then getting here and really just shining in whatever role they've asked him to. I think it just speaks to, one, the players obviously going out there and preparing a certain way, but also the coaching staff, using players to the best of their ability. Things that I love about Cliff is he's never going to ask a player to do something that he doesn't have a lot of confidence in. And you think that's obvious, but that's not necessarily always the case. And you see guys playing really good football because they're asked to do things that they're extremely confident in. And I think it starts with the coaching and the players really just doing everything they can to audition for their roles. And nothing's ever been given to anyone on this team. Even Jaden, they made him earn it throughout training camp, throughout the offseason. And that stuff doesn't go unnoticed by players like myself who have been here for 12 years or been in the league for 12 years. And so it's just a bunch of guys that love to compete, guys that love the process. And like I said, I really, really enjoy being a part of it.
That was Zach Ertz, just kind of encapsulating what I've seen, too. They preach a lot of this, camaraderie, brotherhood, competition, and it's all really manifested and come true. And at every turn, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. And that's different. You get a lot of coach speak and you get a lot of platitudes, and it's all, honest feelings, very transparent about what they're trying to do. And not everything's going to work out. It's sports. But what they say they're going to do, they set out to do, they try to do, and you can see it. And fortunately, they've been very successful so far. So I can't wait to see where this goes from here. And it's not over. And, I know that it's hard not to kind of, especially today when you think about the year, and you move into what's next, it's hard not to sit back and drink it in a little bit and bask in it. And I know that Dan Quinn doesn't want to exactly do that yet. It's not award season yet. But it's hard not to sit back and be grateful for it, especially, for all of us, the fans, all of us who have gone through a generation of waiting to see a team that's set like this. Doesn't mean they're going to win a lot in the future, but it feels like they could. And that's what's really, really different. So I'm thankful this year for everybody who has set this all in motion and all of these decisions that have allowed this team to be in a position to thrive. It'll be on them to make that happen each and every year, but it's set up for them to do it. And that is very, very different as we head into 2025. All right, more on all this with my boothmate, London Fletcher. We do a podcast called The Booth Review that you can get on YouTube, the commanders.com page, the Commanders app. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. So here was some of our thoughts post making the playoffs.
This episode is brought to you by Bleacher Report. How do you follow sports? From college football to the NBA, Bleacher Report brings you the latest news, live scores, and epic highlights from your favorite leagues, teams, and athletes, all in one app. Dive into exclusive shows hosted by your favorite athletes and original Bleacher Report series with breaking news, rumors, and predictions all season long. Download Bleacher Report to personalize your coverage.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
The playoffs. You called it in the summer. 11, maybe 12 wins. We'll see. Here we are. It's reality.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people thought I was being a homer and maybe thought I was drinking a little bit of the Ashburn Kool-Aid.
You were, but that's you're still right.
Well,
doesn't make it any more right.
Here's the thing, though. When you look at, and I looked at, obviously, the moves that we made, having Dan Quinn as the quarterback. I mean, as the new head coach, getting Jaden. And just looking at the schedule, like, okay, I really think we're going to win this game. Felt like we were split with the Eagles. Feel like we would split with the Cowboys. I thought we win here and obviously, probably lose down there. But let's flip that and get to 12. But it's just, has it been the way we've done it to get to this point? Yeah, that's been surprising. All the last-minute victories to come from behind wins. Even yesterday, first half didn't look good at all. But second half, an entirely different ball club. And we can't say enough about Jaden and what he was able to do, especially in the second half of that game.
I want to get to him. I want to stay on the big picture just for a moment. I want to get into the game, too. This is a very special moment for the organization.
Oh, yeah.
It's been 4 years since they've been in the playoffs. They haven't been a wild card team since 2007, so they had to win the division just to get in, which shows you there hasn't been much consistency. They're not consistently there. Even in a year where someone else might be a little bit better than you, you get in anyway. Like the Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore of this era right now. Philadelphia, too. They get in every year. And I do feel like we're at the beginning of something. And it's hard not to, and I know Dan Quinn and them don't want to get into award season yet. And I know that they don't want to hear all the accolades for it yet because their story isn't done being written.
Right.
So I want to spend a few minutes doing it now.
Oh, yeah.
And then getting back into the mind frame of where they want to be because this is very special. This team has not won 11 games since 1991. This team has never in this building won 7 home games, and they did it in year 1 together. And it's hard to ignore that, put your head in the sand and go, okay, what's next? I do want to sip a little champagne here today.
Yeah. When you mentioned that on the broadcast a couple of times about having done this since 1991, and it was I think two or three different things that you mentioned. It's like, dang, since 1991, and we all know how that season ended. And not only how that season ended, that team is considered one of the best teams in NFL history. Like, it's a historical type of team, but when some people call it a rebuild, the team, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn called it a recalibration. And when you accomplish that with a 70% new roster, 60%, whatever the
30 plus players.
Yeah, from the roster standpoint, to do this all in year 1 with the rookie, the home field. You mentioned 7-2. Our fans have been there in droves, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got a chance. When you walked through the concourse pregame, you had a chance. What were you thinking when you walked through that concourse yesterday pregame?
I haven't had an RFK feeling in that building for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of the RG3 year where there was this, oh man, there's kind of an anytime because the quarterback's ceiling is so high.
Right.
And we haven't had that in a long time. But just kind of the feeling of the fan base that never went anywhere. It's just been semi-dormant in the building. But they haven't had anything consistent to cheer for in a long time. And I talk about this all the time, having grown up here and having been fortunate to have tickets to RFK when I was a kid during the heyday when they were one of the best teams, if not the best team in football for 10 years running. They're the heartbeat of the city. And what people don't know, and a generation of fans don't know, is what happens when they win consistently. And last night was like a sign of it's heading back in this direction, which is why I think I don't want to lose sight of the big picture. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of the game and what they did and another miracle, because this has been a joyride like I've never been a part of. Every week is a heart attack. But just the overarching, I think we're at the beginning of something. This isn't a one-off, that like we're heading back into this space where we could join the Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Philadelphia, the teams you can count on to be very competitive and vie for championships every year. We're at the beginning of something like that.
No, you're 100% right, and that's what we all want. We want a perennial contender.
Yes,
year in and year out, like competing for. You're one of the upper echelon teams in football. Let's call it the top 5 or 6 teams where every year, every season, these 5 or 6 teams are going to be in the mix. They're going to make the playoffs, and they have a great chance to represent their conference in the Super Bowl, and that's where we want to get to. That's where I feel like we're building to. I saw Mr. Harris last night as he was. You saw him too, yeah. You saw his happiness.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah, happy birthday. He celebrated his 60th birthday on Saturday. I mean, just the ownership group and the joy that they had. And this is, a guy who owns multiple sports teams. And, but you could tell, like.
He cares.
Not that he doesn't care about this. This is special to him.
Yes.
This is special to him.
What I'm talking about, he also grew up here too.
Right.
And lived it. down the street, went to RFK, so he emotionally connects with this team and this franchise in a way that if you're not from here, you don't understand like what they mean. They can be the heartbeat of the city. They can be the soul of the city. They can be a religious experience, which they've been numerous times this year. We've had out-of-body experiences with them over and over and over. That was me and London Fletcher on the Booth Review. We do this every week after every game to just kind of download and reshare our thoughts with one another after the games that we call every Monday. We'll do it again next week after the regular season finale against Dallas. And then, of course, on the Monday after whoever we play in the playoffs in the wild card round, 6 seed or 7 seed, we'll see where it ends up. And Dan Quinn said yesterday, if Washington wants to get the 6 seed, that it's important to them. So they're going to play this game. They're not resting anybody on purpose just because they've qualified. So if they do get the 6 seed, it will avoid a trip to Philadelphia. It would either be Tampa Bay or Los Angeles for the wild card round. If they lose, we'll have to wait for a result from Green Bay to see where we end up, the 6 or the 7 seed. I know we haven't spent a ton of time talking about the college football season, but the playoffs are here, the quarterfinals, and the matchups, which are just, boy, do they need to rejigger this thing next year. Why Ohio State is playing Oregon in the quarterfinal, where the eye test tells you they bare minimum should be playing each other in the next round. They're going to have to figure out a way to kind of slate this. They actually fell into what one of my chief complaints about the NFL playoff seeding is, that just because you win your division doesn't mean you should get a home game or you should be seated higher than somebody else. Like either the Falcons or the Buccaneers are going to win the NFC South, and either one of them could have a worse record than every single wild card team that's in the playoffs this year in the NFC. So they shouldn't have a home game against any of the teams below them, but they will. And obviously it's just preposterous that a 14-win team is going to end up as a wild card team this year. So this is one of the drums I beat all the time. If you win your division, you're in. I think let's keep that as still being important. So you win your division, you get in. But that doesn't guarantee you a home game and doesn't guarantee that you're going to be a top 4 seed. If you have a worse record than somebody else who qualified from another division, you just fall down the seedings. You get to play, you qualify. The college football playoffs are going to have to think about it the same way, I think. Because they decided that if you won your conference, you would be seated a certain way and then everybody else would kind of chips or fall where they may. That did not, I think, balance out where teams should be. So Boise State at number 3. I mean, this goes back to the old, should they even be invited into the playoff when it was, 4 teams, because they didn't play the schedules that other teams played. Now, I think they've been overrated here by having the season they've had, by playing the schedule they've had. Do they belong in the playoff? Yeah, absolutely. Should they be a higher seed than Penn State or Texas or Ohio State? No. Of course not. Penn State. Now, I know this is in a neutral site and it doesn't really matter, but the point is this is why the bracket ended up with the wrong teams playing each other too soon. This matchup between Oregon and Ohio State shouldn't have happened this week. It should have happened in a subsequent week. Anyway, Penn State, Boise State. Give me Penn State, albeit I'll buy this Ashton Genty guy has a huge game, but I just don't think that quality of program is mattering here. And I know Penn State loses a lot of these type of big games, but typically not to teams that are out of big conferences like the Big Ten. So I'm going to take Penn State here to move on and defeat Boise State. Texas, Arizona State. Arizona State's a great story. Arizona State was predicted to be bottom of their conference. They've had season for the ages, surprising season. I like this coach, kind of like what he's about. I think Texas is a little too big, too good. So I expect Texas to defeat Arizona State. So that would be 2 quote-unquote upsets that occur. All right, let's get to the big boy games. I think kind of hard to figure. Ohio State, Oregon played a classic out in Eugene earlier this year. They're down in Pasadena in the Rose Bowl. I really, again, I continue to harp on this. I really don't think these two should be playing each other here, but what's done is done. I think Oregon beats them more significantly this time. Ohio State in these big games have come up short over and over and over. I like Oregon to win the whole thing. So to do that, they're going to have to win this one. I've got them beating Ohio State by 10. And then the night game tomorrow is Notre Dame and Georgia, which I think is more of a toss-up. Carson Beck out. I don't love the Georgia offense. I think they've struggled down the stretch. Notre Dame, this would be a big step up for them to win on this level at this point in time in recent years. And it's down in New Orleans. So traveling Notre Dame fans, it's hard to know what kind of crowd we're going to get because I would think that that's a very heavy SEC crowd, but I don't know. Maybe you get a lot of Notre Dame people down in New Orleans. Should be interesting. I'm going to take Georgia. No, I'm going to take Notre Dame kind of reluctantly. Georgia's defense, which I think is best in the country, they're producing NFL player after NFL player down there. Great scheme, too. Very, very good pressure schemes by Kirby Smart. I'll take, but give me Notre Dame to beat a Georgia team that just doesn't score enough in the end. 24-21, something like that. Close game between those two teams. Here on ESPN 630, you will hear coverage of UVA and NC State at 11:30 down in Charlottesville. Little hoops for you on New Year's Eve. All right, everybody. Happy New Year. Can't wait to talk to you all in 2025. We'll be back on Thursday. Be safe, be well, and we'll get you set for Commanders and Cowboys when we return on Thursday. Bram, watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.